This is Land of Havilah, Jeremiah 52. This last chapter of the book recounts the fall of Jerusalem. It's a confirmation that Jeremiah's prophecies of destruction came to pass. Verse 1. Zedekiah was 21 years old when he began to reign. He reigned 11 years in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Hamutal, the daughter of Jeremiah of Libnah. He did that which was evil in Yahweh's sight, according to all that Jehoiakim had done. For through Yahweh's anger this happened in Jerusalem and Judah until he had cast them out from his presence. Zedekiah rebelled against the king of Babylon. Comment: Zedekiah's birth name was Mattaniah, but Nebuchadnezzar appointed him to the throne when he was 21 years old and changed his name to Zedekiah, 2 Kings 24:17. Of course, Nebuchadnezzar changed his name as a demonstration that he had complete power over him. Zedekiah was about 30 years younger than the prophet Jeremiah, Jeremiah 1, verses 2 and 7. In verse 1 of this chapter, Zedekiah's father-in-law was also named Jeremiah. In verses 2 and 3, Zedekiah continued in evil until Yahweh cast him from his presence. Zedekiah persecuted Jeremiah and rebelled from Nebuchadnezzar. Coming up during Zedekiah's reign, Nebuchadnezzar set siege to Jerusalem the third time and reestablished his sovereignty in Zedekiah's 9th year, verse 4. In the 9th year of his reign, in the 10th month, in the 10th day of the month, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came, he and all his army, against Jerusalem, and encamped against it, and they built forts against it round about. So the city was besieged to the 11th year of King Zedekiah. In the 4th month, in the 9th day of the month, the famine was severe in the city, so that there was no bread for the people of the land. Comment: in verse 4, Jerusalem fell on a date that equates to July 586 or 587 B.C. In verses 4 to 6, after 19 months of siege, the bread ran out. Coming up sometime after the bread ran out, the Babylonians breached the city wall and their soldiers started pouring into the city. As they were coming in, Zedekiah and his men tried to escape the city. Verse 7. Then a breach was made in the city, and all the men of war fled and went out of the city by night by way of the gate between the two walls, which was by the king's garden. Now the Chaldeans were against the city all around. The men of war went toward the Arabah, but the army of the Chaldeans pursued the king and overtook Zedekiah in the plains of Jericho, and all his army was scattered from him. Comment in verses 7 and 8, the bread ran out. Then King Zedekiah and some of his army escaped at night through a gate between two walls by the king's garden. There's no way it was a normal gate or the Babylonians would have been guarding it. It had to be camouflaged. Probably it was just a section of stones that were lightly mortared and could be quickly removed. From inside the garden, the spot was invisible behind a wall and could be opened without observation. Anyway, Zedekiah and his little army escaped the city through that private exit and headed east, but after about 15 miles, Nebuchadnezzar's army caught up with them at the plain of the Jordan River near Jericho. The Judean army scattered in verse 8. Speaking of the Babylonians, verse 9, Then they took the king and carried him up to the king of Babylon to Riblah in the land of Hamath, and he pronounced judgment on him. Comment in verse 9, Babylonian troops took Zedekiah 200 miles north to Nebuchadnezzar's headquarters at Riblah, where Nebuchadnezzar pronounced judgment on him. This fulfilled Jeremiah's word to Zedekiah that he wouldn't escape the Babylonians and that he would speak with Nebuchadnezzar face to face, Jeremiah 32:4. Nebuchadnezzar's judgment was as follows, verse 10. The king of Babylon killed the sons of Zedekiah before his eyes. He also killed all the princes of Judah in Riblah. He put out the eyes of Zedekiah, and the king of Babylon bound him in fetters and carried him to Babylon and put him in prison until the day of his death. Comment in verses 10 and 11, Nebuchadnezzar put Zedekiah's eyes out, sent him 700 or 800 miles to Babylon in fetters, and kept him in prison there until the day he died. 1 month after Jerusalem fell, verse 12. Now in the 5th month, in the 10th day of the month, which was the 19th year of King Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, who stood before the king of Babylon, came into Jerusalem. Comment: after Jerusalem fell, Nebuchadnezzar sent an officer named Nebuzaradan to Jerusalem. His title was Captain of the Guard, and his mission was to conduct final operations in the area to weaken Judah and Jerusalem to the point that the Babylonian army would not have to come back there a fourth time. According to Nebuchadnezzar's orders, speaking of Nebuzaradan, verse 13, he burned Yahweh's house and the king's house and all the houses of Jerusalem, even every great house he burned with fire. All the army of the Chaldeans who were with the captain of the guard broke down all the walls of Jerusalem all around. Then Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, carried away captive of the poorest of the people and the residue of the people who were left in the city, and those who fell away, who fell to the king of Babylon, and the residue of the multitude. But Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, left of the poorest of the land to be vineyard keepers and farmers. Comment in verses 13 to 16, the troops under Nebuzaradan burned the whole city, including the temple, the king's palace, all the buildings, all the houses, and they broke down the city wall all around. The Babylonians had already carried away much of the population, especially the upper crust, but now the troops under Nebuzaradan carried away everyone in town, including the poorest and everyone who had surrendered. But as to the people of the countryside, they left some of the poorest of those to keep the vineyards and farms. Now concerning the temple, its giant brass columns, its massive brass basin called the sea, its treasures of gold and silver, and all its appointments, verse 17. The Chaldeans broke the pillars of brass that were in Yahweh's house, and the bases and the bronze sea that were in Yahweh's house in pieces, and carried all of their brass to Babylon. They also took away the pots, the shovels, the snuffers, the basins, the spoons, and all the vessels of brass with which they ministered. The captain of the guard took away the cups, the fire pans, the basins, the pots, the lampstands, the spoons, and the bowls, that which was of gold in gold, and that which was of silver in silver. They took the 2 pillars, the 1 sea, and the 12 bronze bulls that were under the bases, which King Solomon had made for Yahweh's house. The brass of all these vessels was without weight. As for the pillars, the height of the 1 pillar was 18 cubits, and a line of 12 cubits encircled it, and its thickness was 4 fingers. It was hollow. A capital of brass was on it, and the height of 1 capital was 5 cubits, with network and pomegranates on the capital all around, all of brass, and the 2nd pillar also had like these and pomegranates. There were 96 pomegranates on the sides. All the pomegranates were 100 on the network all around. Comment in verses 17 to 23, after burning Yahweh's house, the Chaldeans carried away all the glory and treasure of the temple. To the Jews it was unthinkable, but if they had listened to Jeremiah, they would have predicted it. They believed their priests and false prophets that Yahweh would keep protecting Jerusalem and his house, just like he had been doing for 20 generations of the house of David. But they ignored that Yahweh said he would remove them from the land and cast the temple out of his sight if they turned away from him, 2 Chronicles 7:19 and 20. Once again, Yahweh's word proved supreme over the ministers who refused to preach the word, who misrepresented it, who didn't take it seriously, didn't believe it, neglected it, twisted it, scoffed at it, ignored it, and in the case of most of the prophets, they made it up completely from scratch or copied what the other prophets were saying. Almost everyone went along with the prevailing narrative of the political and religious leaders. Now concerning some of the Jewish leadership and upper crust who were still in the city, verse 24. The captain of the guard took Seraiah the chief priest and Zephaniah the 2nd priest and the 3 keepers of the threshold, and out of the city he took an officer who was set over the men of war, and 7 men of those who saw the king's face who were found in the city, and the scribe of the captain of the army who mustered the people of the land, and 60 men of the people of the land who were found in the middle of the city. Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, took them and brought them to the king of Babylon to Riblah. The king of Babylon struck them and put them to death at Riblah in the land of Hamath. Comment in verses 24 to 27, Nebuzaradan identified the Jewish leadership who remained in the city, including the high priest, the 2nd priest behind him, 3 temple officials, 7 of the king's administration, 2 army officers, and 60 others. He sent them to Riblah, Nebuchadnezzar passed judgment on them there and executed them. Now, adding up the captives Nebuchadnezzar took over the years after several excursions to Judah, still in verse 27. So Judah was carried away captive out of his land. This is the number of the people whom Nebuchadnezzar carried away captive. In the 7th year, 3,023 Jews. In the 18th year of Nebuchadnezzar, he carried away captive from Jerusalem 832 persons. In the 23rd year of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, carried away captive of the Jews 745 people. All the people were 4,600. Comment: not mentioned in verses 28 to 30, Nebuchadnezzar took control of Jerusalem the first time in 605 B.C. and carried away a few young nobles and royal family members, including Daniel and his friends, Daniel chapter 1. But because of rebellion, Nebuchadnezzar had to come back 7 years later in 597 and set siege the second time, after which he took 3,023 in verse 28, but the number was 10,000 according to 2 Kings 24. And because of rebellion again, he set siege a third time, and in 586 or 587 in verse 29, he took 832. Then even again, about 4 or 5 years after the fall of Jerusalem, in verse 30, this was probably after Gedaliah the governor was assassinated, the Babylonians took another 745 Jews, either from Judah or Egypt. The text doesn't say. The total number of captives in verses 28 to 30 is 4,600, and it's more if we go by the numbers of 2 Kings. This emptying of the land came also by famine, pestilence, battle casualties, and flight to other countries. Now concerning young King Jehoiachin, also known as Jeconiah and Coniah, who was taken captive after the second siege, verse 31. In the 37th year of the captivity of Jehoiachin, king of Judah, in the 12th month, in the 25th day of the month, Evil-Merodach, king of Babylon, in the first year of his reign, lifted up the head of Jehoiachin, king of Judah, and released him from prison. He spoke kindly to him, and set his throne above the throne of the kings who were with him in Babylon, and changed his prison garments. Jehoiachin ate bread before him continually all the days of his life. For his allowance there was a continual allowance given him by the king of Babylon, every day a portion, until the day of his death, all the days of his life. Comment regarding verses 31 to 34. King Jehoiachin was taken captive from Jerusalem to Babylon at either the age of 8 or 18, 2 Chronicles 36:9 and 2 Kings 24:8. He stayed in prison in Babylon for 37 years. When Nebuchadnezzar died, his son Evil-Merodach inherited the Babylonian throne. In his first year he released Jehoiachin. By this time Jehoiachin was either 45 or 55 years old. In verse 32, of all the captive kings being held in Babylon, Jehoiachin was Evil-Merodach's favorite. Evil-Merodach, quote, set his throne, end quote, above the thrones of the others. We might assume none of the captive kings had any power, but they were useful as consultants, especially in matters pertaining to their native lands. In verses 33 to 34, Jehoiachin routinely and continually ate at Evil-Merodach's table. We suppose a royal's ideal companion is another royal. Evil-Merodach gave Jehoiachin a continual allowance the rest of his life. Evil-Merodach's favor toward him was a fulfillment of Jeremiah's prophecy in chapter 24 that Jehoiachin and the group who were taken with him were good figs, and that God would set his eyes on them for good. And in more fulfillment of the good fig prophecy, Jehoiachin produced a grandson named Zerubbabel, 1 Chronicles 3:19, who led the Jews back to Judah around 538, Ezra 2:2. And further on, Jesus descended from Jehoiachin. Jesus' genealogy in Matthew chapter 1 calls Jehoiachin Jeconiah the captive. That's the book of Jeremiah. Deep thanks to the Lord for allowing us to complete it and for opening it to us as we went. Please find our other titles one of 3 ways, either at landofhavilah.net, where you can make connection to all the YouTubes, or you can find them directly on YouTube at Land of Havilah channel, or by your favorite podcast app at the Land of Havilah channel. We have about 80% of the Bible so far. Learning the Bible is a top priority, 2 Timothy 3:16 and 17. As we so well understand from reading Jeremiah, we cannot depend on our priests, ministers, and rabbis because many times they do not believe God's word, don't teach it, and they and their followers will suffer mightily for it. We need to hear from God ourselves and save ourselves from this crooked generation. Acts 2:40. God bless until next time.